Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai was Prabhupada.
Okay. So, should I begin with the prayers?
Mm-hmm.
Om Jnana Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhya Eva Cha Patitanaam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayat Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Okay. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 19, Verse 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Maitreya Vacha. Atadikshata Rajatu. Haya Medha Satena Sa. Rama Varte Mano Shetre. Yatra Prachi Sarasvati. Translation. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, King Prithu initiated the performance of 100 horse sacrifices at the spot where the river Sarasvati flows towards the east. This piece of land is known as Brahmavarta, and it was controlled by Swayambhuva Manu. All right, there's no purport here, so pretty self-explanatory, that one. Verse 2. Tadapi precha bhagavan karmati sayam atmana satakraturna mamrishe pritoryagna mahotsavam. Translation. When the most powerful Indra, the king of heaven, saw this, he considered the fact that King Prithu was going to exceed him in fruitive activities. Thus Indra could not tolerate the great sacrificial ceremonies performed by King Prithu. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the material world, everyone who comes to enjoy himself or lord it over material nature is envious of others. This envy is also found in the personality of the King of Heaven, Indra. As evident from revealed scriptures, Indra was several times envious of many persons. He was especially envious of great fruitive activities and the execution of yoga practices or siddhis. Indeed, he could not tolerate them, and he desired to break them up. He was envious due to fear that those who performed great sacrifices for the execution of mystic yoga might occupy his seat. Since no one in this material world can tolerate another's advancement, everyone in the material world is called Matsara, envious. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is therefore said that Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for those who are completely near Matsara, non-envious. In other words, one who is not free from the contamination of envy cannot advance in Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, however, if someone excels another person, the devotee who is excelled thinks how fortunate the other person is to be advancing in devotional service. Such non-envy is typical of Vaikuntha. However, when one is envious of his competitor that is material, the demigods posted in the material world are not exempt from envy. So, interesting verse, this one. And excuse me a second, I have to plug in my power here. It shows you even exalted personalities like King Indra can become envious of a devotee, actually an incarnation of Krishna, King Prithu. So, we've seen this so many times. Demigods, although very exalted, and the King of Heaven himself, is envious of such a things like yogic practices or siddhis, and someone accumulating fruitive activities. Of course, King Prithu wasn't doing it only for that reason. He wasn't doing it for that reason, but he was taking part in a pastime where this invoked the envy of King Indra, and then we see the pastime as it plays out. So, we don't really have a huge understanding of these pastimes, but we do know that these pastimes with pure devotees, especially incarnations of Krishna, they're all meant to be like that. They're meant to happen that way so that a personality becomes envious, or, if you remember, of course, in Krishna's pastimes, the inhabitants of Vrindavan were showered with columns of water from King Indra because he became envious, and of course Krishna saved them. But there's many examples of this, demigods giving into these sort of, you could say, material emotions, or fallacy, like they become fallacious, they become affected by these emotions, material emotions, and but these are pastimes, so we don't know, the position of these great personalities, and you know the Lord may be covering them over, or they may be just acting out of material envy, pure material envy, but we don't know exactly. But we can only, that's why it's important to read these purports very carefully and study them and understand them, because sometimes um, different devotees, different demigods get covered over by the Lord, so he can take part in the pastime, or great devotees take birth as demons to facilitate the Lord's pastimes, because he likes to, for instance, kill demons. So we see that also, that great devotees take birth as very powerful demons, and they engage in these pastimes with the Lord. So it's always interesting to see how these situations play out. And as you can see here, Prabhupada is explaining that this envious nature is due to fear that someone else is going to exceed us. So that's also interesting, that out of fear that we become envious. It's not that we're necessarily, um, you wouldn't sort of um, associate fear with envy. But when you think about that, it's true, because when you become envious of someone who's got more than you, you're fearful of them becoming more important than you, or, on a higher level of society, or whatever it is that you're getting envious about. It's not the actual thing that they're getting so much, the car or the house or whatever it is. Um, it's the fear that we'll be less compared to them. And this is the case with Indra. He was fearful that King Prithu would become more advanced in fruitive activities. So, and he couldn't tolerate it. So it's just quite interesting to read about how demigods on this level can become fearful and get covered over like this in the material world, even when they're dealing with incarnations of Krishna or even Krishna himself. So, and unless we actually understand why we become envious and work out our own sort of issues in life and our work out our problems, our issues that we have from previous experiences, unless we work that out, we'll continue to become to be envious of others, and we can't make advancement like that. In fact, we might lose our Krishna consciousness, But in Vaikuntha, devotees are pushing each other towards Krishna, and they're very happy to see someone become more advanced than them. They're happy to see that someone's getting close to Krishna, because they're actually pushing them towards Krishna. So that's what we should be like in our devotional service, in our association with devotees. We should be pushing each other towards the Lord and helping each other to make advancement, and be happy when you see someone becoming advanced, and not be fearful that, oh no, this person's getting more knowledge than me, or this person's getting more spiritually advanced than me. That is a material quality. But Prabhupada actually confirms at the end of this, he says, demigods posted in the material world are not exempt from envy. So they do become envious, and that's part of the pastime, that they become envious, and then the pastime is showing us something, it's teaching us something, it's giving us faith, or it's teaching us a lesson. All these pastimes are meant for that, and that's why the Lord and his devotees appear from time to time to perform these pastimes, so we can learn something and look at ourselves and make advancement. Okay, did you want to read the next verse?
Prabhu, I had a question regarding this verse and practical application of how we can bring it into our lives. So sometimes there is a sense or a feeling that everything should happen nicely for Krishna. And like, for example, simple example, if a pujari comes late for service, the other pujari may look at them and they may feel, oh, this person is late. And, so where do we draw the line between wishing that things happen nicely for Krishna versus envy? Because, for example, if one pujari comes late and the pujari next to him goes and reports to the head pujari and says, oh, this pujari came late for his service. So how do we know in our heart if we are doing it from a sense of duty, a sense of wishing that things happen nicely for Krishna versus envy?
Because in your mind, you're wanting to help that devotee overcome a difficulty. And also you're thinking of the deities is the main thing, actually. Because Prabhupada said that punctuality and cleanliness are the two main ingredients in deity worship. So if you're thinking of the deity's welfare, that things are going to be late, or somehow the service is going to be affected in a negative way. For instance, if someone comes late but they're able to do their service nicely, that's okay, as long as they get it done in time. Some devotees are faster than others, but if the end result is that they come late and the service is not done on time, or the service is done not nicely, In other words, they had to rush through and try and get it done, and in that process, their service is not quality service. Then that's the right motivation to say something to them or to an authority. Yeah, so it's just about, you should feel it in yourself. If you're truly thinking about the deities first, that they're going to suffer because of this, that we're going to be late, or the dressing's not going to be as nice, or the offering's not going to be as nice. If that's in your mind, then that's fine, because you're thinking of them. You're not thinking of your own sort of like, maybe you've got a grudge against that devotee or something, whatever it is. You can always tell in your own heart when it's the right motivation, because you don't feel weighed down by anything. You don't feel any negative emotions coming in, anger or resentment. You don't feel those things because you're just thinking of the deities. So these other emotions don't come into play. I think that's my experience anyway. That sound all right?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you. Yeah, I just feel like there is so many layers and layers and layers and layers. Sometimes it's hard to tell, like, if it's coming from a place of envy or like some other motivation.
Yeah, I mean, it might be, but you can change that if you see it in yourself. That's why looking at yourself is important, and keeping it sort of being aware of what's happening within your own mind. And like I said, if these other emotions are coming in, like anger, or I mean, you can be angry for the Lord, but that's a more advanced stage. That's a very high level of devotion. We can't always claim that we're getting angry in pure, like it's pure anger. But if you feel these other emotions coming in, and there's a sort of feeling in your heart like a knot, uh, you know, then that's my experience, is that you just feel these other emotions. You sort of like, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like your motivation is correct. But if you're doing it with the idea that the deity worship should be at a certain standard, then that's okay. That motivation is fine. And also, you can be thinking of the devotee themselves and thinking, well, it's not good for their spiritual life that they're coming late and making mistakes, or whatever it is. Um, so, you know, there's two aspects there.
Thank you, Prabhu. I had one other aspect, like what if like if there is anger or resentment, then what should a devotee do?
Well, you just have to try. You just have to try to ignore those emotions and realize what's going on in yourself, and check yourself from becoming like that, and say to yourself, this is not good. This is not the right motivation here. I'm you know I shouldn't continue with this. I should change something inside of myself. And so then you just switch over. It's like flipping a switch. um that you change your motivation, and you start thinking of the deities, and you start thinking of maybe that devotee, their welfare, their spiritual welfare also. So you just have to flip that switch over and consciously change the way you're thinking for that to happen. But that all comes from our sadhana, when we're chanting nicely and we're following all the regular principles, and we're trying hard to absorb the philosophy, then automatically we just become free from all that. That's ultimately the answer. But in the meantime, if we're not exactly um, chanting so well, or we're not doing everything to the best of our ability, In the meantime, we can just check ourselves and say, you know, I shouldn't be thinking like this. I should just not think like this. Change it. I had to do that in a project with many devotees, dealing with all different types of devotees, and you just have to keep your mind on the goal, what you're trying to achieve, rather than focus on all the small things. You're just trying to get devotees to come on board and be in the same consciousness as yourself. So you just associate with devotees like that. You're trying to achieve good quality deity worship. So you just say it in a very Mother Goodness way that, you know, we're trying to maintain a schedule here. We're trying to maintain good quality deity worship for the Lord. We don't want to commit offenses to the Lord. We would like that you can come on time and do this and have plenty of time to do the service nicely. You know, whatever it is that you're having to say to someone or say to the authorities. Yeah, you just have to consciously actually switch over. Just like when you're chanting and you're listening to your mind, you have to consciously start listening to the mantra again. It's just a switch that you have to flick that switch consciously, otherwise it doesn't happen. So it's just something that you have to do. It's like your own spiritual reformation, I guess you could say.
Mhm. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Did you want to read the next verse?
Sure. Text 3. Yatra yagyapate sakshat bhagavan harir ishvara anva bhuyata sarvatma sarvaloka guru prabhu. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is present in everyone's heart as the super soul, and he is the proprietor of all planets and the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifice. He was personally present at the sacrifice made by King Prithu. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In this verse, the word Sakshat is significant. King Prithu Maharaj was a Shaktavesha avatar incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Actually, Prithu Maharaj was a living entity, but he acquired specific powers from Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu, however, is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus belongs to the category of Vishnu Tattva. Maharaj Prithu belonged to the Jiva Tattva. The Vishnu Tattva indicates God, whereas the Jiva Tattva indicates the part and parcel of God. When God's part and parcel is specially empowered, he is called Shaktavesha Avatar. Lord Vishnu is herein described as Hari Ishvara. The Lord is so kind that he takes all miserable conditions away from his devotees. Consequently, he is called Hari. He is described as Ishvara because he can do whatever he likes. He is the supreme controller. The supreme Ishvara, Purushottama, is Lord Krishna. He exhibits his powers as Ishvara or the supreme controller. When he assures his devotee in Bhagavad Gita, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. He can immediately make his devotee immune from all reactions caused by sinful life if the devotee simply surrenders unto him. He is described herein as Sarvatma, meaning that he is present in everyone's heart as the super soul. And as such, he is the supreme teacher of everyone. If we are fortunate enough to take the lessons given by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, our lives immediately become successful. no one can give better instructions to human society than Lord Krishna. Is there more to this? Done.
So, can I ask a question regarding this?
Yes, Mataji.
So, like you read that if we surrender to Lord Vishnu, then all our troubles are taken. Sorry, my stomach is hurting lately. At least since for 2 days. So sorry, just give me 2 minutes. Sorry, I shouldn't have. So my question was, I'll make it quick so that so if we like surrender ourselves to God and pray to Him, then why do we suffer so much? Like I've seen that when you take without consciousness, I feel personally I suffer more than I did earlier. So
What was your last sentence, Ruchi Mataji? I'm sorry. The voice was going in and out, so I couldn't catch the essence of what you were asking.
I meant to just say, if we surrender to Lord Vishnu, then why do we have to suffer so much? Like physically, emotionally, mentally. He said that he takes away all the miseries since he is called Hari. But like the devotees and the gurus or whatever, I'm just talking about myself. Like I feel I have to suffer a lot, especially when I pray for surrender more and more. Yeah.
Very nice question, Ruchi Mataji. It's a very practical question. So I can share based on my own personal experience. Of course, I can share based on Shastra, but I feel that, I think it will be more useful in this context if I share from my personal experience. So when I first came to Krishna consciousness, there were so many things that were very upsetting for me. I didn't like many things. And I was also suffering a lot, like emotionally and physically. And in so many different ways, I was suffering a lot. And everybody used to come and say, like, oh, all you need to do is to surrender to Krishna. So I could not understand what is the meaning of surrender to Krishna. It was very difficult for me to understand. But over a course of years, as I tried to apply myself in Krishna consciousness, what I have begun to understand is that surrender means we surrender on the path that has been shown by previous devotees. So it is described that there are 7 principal ways of approaching the Supreme Lord. 9 principal ways of approaching the Supreme Lord. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnum, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So these are the 9. That means Shravanam is hearing, Kirtanam is chanting, Vishnu, Smaranam, thinking of the Supreme Lord, Padasevanam, worshipping his lotus feet, Archanam is performing deity worship, Vandanam is praying, offering prayers to the Supreme Lord, Sakhyam, Dasyam, Atmanivedanam, then becoming a friend to the Lord, becoming a servant of the Lord, and surrendering everything we have to the Supreme Lord. So surrender just doesn't mean it's not something a fantasy idea of surrender. And Prabhupada says this many times. People think that, that if I just as they show in movies that, someone gets fascinated by somebody. So it's not some fascination, but it is by all these 9 processes that have been given to us by previous acharyas. So we pick one of them and then go deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's like basically going into the depths of the ocean. You know, we can be on the surface, but when we are on the surface of devotional practices, then we experience the pains and pleasures of the material world still, because we are halfway, we are neither here nor there. So most of the devotees usually, like at our level, I'm just trying to include everybody, but not everybody is at the same level as I am. But because I'm at that level where I'm still like unable to grasp the sweetness of devotional life, I'm still feeling the material pains and pleasures. That's how I understood it. But the more we absorb ourselves in these processes, especially chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is the gateway for all the other processes that have been given. So the more we become absorbed in chanting the holy name of the Lord, the more we'll get entrance to relief from the material pains. And I have experienced this in my life. The more I try to chant the holy name of the Lord, my other pains, the mind becomes pained by influence of modes of passion and ignorance. So we get, I can say, in my experience, I got relief from my emotional distress by focusing on my chanting. So that's why I always share with other devotees, like, please focus on your chanting. You know, you will definitely experience this effect. So that's how I see it. If anyone else wants to add to Ruchi Mataji's very nice question, like, please also add.
Yeah, I was going to say, also the Lord can give us pain and suffering. He can take it away, but he can also give it. And that can be seen as a blessing or some mercy, so that we become detached from the body and understand that we're not this body. And that, for instance, at the time of death, when we leave the body, it's a very painful process. And if we learn to tolerate those inconveniences to the body during this life, we can be trained. Prabhupada always said that this life is like training for leaving the body. This lifetime is a training period for leaving the body. So we can leave the body in a very peaceful state and not be disturbed by these bodily demands or these bodily pains. So it can be viewed also as mercy to have some sort of bodily suffering. But generally speaking, the Lord will protect us and take away miserable conditions. But sometimes he doesn't do that. Sometimes he actually, for instance, Srila Prabhupada, he took away everything from him, and he's a pure devotee. And Srila Prabhupada had 2 heart attacks. He had many problems with his health and many painful experiences. But if you listen to the devotees that were with him, he tolerated all those things. Like he had a buzzing sound in his or he had something, a pain in his head or something for a long, long time, and he just tolerated it, and it passed. So it's also the level of our consciousness will determine how we deal with miserable conditions or situations that are very nice, materially speaking, and that the idea is to become detached from both situations, the good times and the bad times. I mean, that's my experience also.
Thank you for the very nice answer. Thank you.
read the next verse?
I can read it.
Okay.
It's Pandito Brahma Sarva Pyami Loka Bhalara Sahankaya Upagya No Gandhavir Munibis Chaksharo Gunaya When Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrificial arena, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all the chief predominating personalities of every planet, as well as their followers, came with him. When he appeared on the scene, the residents of Gandharva, the great sages, and the residents of Apsara all praised him. Doesn't have a good word.
Okay. Did you want to continue, Mataji?
No, it's fine. I'm not well. Thanks, but I just.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, what time is it? 7:40. Maybe read this last verse here. Siddha Vijadara Daicha Danava Guyakadaya Sunanda Nanda Pramukta Parshada Pravara Hare. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. The Lord was accompanied by the residents of Siddhaloka and Vidaraloka, all the descendants of Diti and the demons and the yakshas. He was also accompanied by his chief associates, headed by Sananda and Nanda. Shall we read a few of these, or would you like to finish up soon?
All of them do not have purport, so maybe we can read one or
Mm.
two if they don't have a purport. Yeah.
Okay. Kapilo Narado Dato Yogesha Sanakadaya Tam Anviyur Bhagavata Ye Chatat Sevan Otsuka. Translation. Great devotees who were always engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as the great sages named Kapila, Narada, and Dattatreya, and masters of mystics' powers, headed by Sanaka Kumara, all attended the great sacrifice with Lord Vishnu. Okay, so that's quite a long purport there. Shall we leave that for next time?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. So we give it enough time to discuss nicely all the points.
Okay.
Anyone who didn't get a chance to speak, would you like to say anything? Okay, I guess we are good. Thank you so much, Rasa Rasika Prabhu, Ruchi Mataji, and Premarisa for joining, and Rasa Rasika Prabhu especially for reading, and Ruchi Mataji also. So we'll meet tomorrow, same time, 5 o'clock. And until then, have a very, very Krishna conscious evening. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.